Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name's Matt Lehman, and on this stream we build Django apps, and we're going to continue on the homeschool app tonight. We're going to be working on a ManyToManyField ideally, and making some changes to the app that we started last week related to when students would go on school breaks and making filtering work per student. We'll get into the details of that in a moment. Before we get started, though, I want to let you know there are ways to keep in touch with me. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on other social media platforms. I usually go by the handle MB Lehman. And if you like what you see this evening and you want to support me financially, because I continue to make Django content in a variety of forms, you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/mblehman. I do want to thank the patrons that I have already of Rupert, Andrew, Dragos, Patrick, Eric, Philip, Miguel, and Peter. I appreciate your contributions. It really helps me out a lot. So let's get into the plan for tonight. We're going to continue on school breaks. Hey, Shivans, welcome. Lockdown there in New Zealand. I said New York. That's ridiculous. The Z or Z and Y letters are so close together. Cool. Well, glad you're able to join in. We're going to work on the school break model that we were working on last week, and we were making a bunch of changes, and I got pretty deep in the rabbit hole with all those changes, and I said I might get to the rest of it after the stream, and I didn't. I had a busy week, so we're going to pick up where we left off. I did a little bit better. I went back and at least marked a couple things that were to get to the right set of to-dos that we have remaining so that we don't have to continue to filter out the wrong ones that are in the app. But we're going to continue on that and learn some stuff along the way. I think tonight we're going to touch on some template stuff. There's some logic as I was looking at it that is at a different layer in the view code, and we're going to have to break that apart because of the way this change is happening. So we'll get into that. That's the plan. And with any luck, we'll get through all of the API changes around this, and then be able to do the actual data change that underlies this. When I've been thinking about which way I want to go with that, I think I finally reached a conclusion about the only approach that I see that's kind of sensible, that's the least data invasive with migrations and that sort of thing. So I marked the to-dos here with to-do 434, which is the issue number that we've been working on, and we will probably just start right at that point. We can't do this one yet because this one is actually talking about using the data. So this is the API change we discussed at length last week, and why we made it this way, and keyword only argument and all that stuff. And we're not going to continue on that path probably for a while. I want to make sure that the other stuff around it actually works properly first. So let's look at this other place in the core views, and we've got two spots, or we've got a spot here with this is the daily view, I believe. I believe this is also going to apply to the weekly view as well. So I'm wondering why I don't have that check there. So there's something to check right off the bat. Of part of this is going to be getting schedules about and showing breaks in the weekly view too. And I don't remember why it's working out this way to not get that stuff. Because we're not using isBreak, we're using getBreak. So that's going to be problematic. So put another to do here. The weekly view is affected too. But maybe we'll start with that one, I don't know. Okay. Here we are in the daily view. The daily view, let's bring it up. Bring up the app so we can take a look. Shows the schedule for students for the day. And as a reminder, we're trying to make school breaks need to be filterable per student. That's the I guess the objective or the goal for tonight, or to continue on this goal. And that's what we have to do. And we have a lot of that API available, but we're taking it through the lens of a method called isBreak on the school year. And really, we really need to check the underlying method below that, which is the getBreak method. So let's search for that and see if there are places that maybe I missed. Oh man, rabbit hole keeps getting deeper. Not cool. So we have to handle here because we haven't pushed. All right, let's go back to that school model. We did this work on isBreak, but this logic is going to be pushed down, and the student attribute is going to be pushed down into getBreak too. And that's where the magic's really going to happen. So we need to also look for these getBreak occurrences and be able to fix them as well. And so maybe what we should do at this point, before working on the to-dos, is go ahead and update this API in the same way that we were doing with isBreak. It should be a keyword argument kind of thing. It should have the same kind of patterns. We're not going to reiterate why we did it that way. We'll just do the same thing because it's being asked in the same way. And then we can go annotate where getBreak is used and make sure it's used in all the right spots. And then we can finally start going back up the stack and resolving these things. So step one, I guess there's probably a middle step in between there to run the tests again because I think they're going to break. Or there should be tests that break with the coverage. But let's add the student, and we'll do optional student because that's what we know is going to be coming from the isBreak method. And you can immediately see stuff broke. The getBreak function here is now wrong. So let's pass in student equal student, because it has to be a keyword argument the way we're specifying it. And now we can take this to do and move it down here. So we still have to resolve it, but the place that it has to be resolved is a little different. The other thing that we want to do, and let's kill the web server right now, we don't need that for a moment. So we've got our filtering for getBreak, and we fixed this spot. And we've got, now why did the calendar go away? Oh man, that's disturbing. I literally just had getBreak and then the school calendar like disappeared for one of those times. Now it's back. That does not instill confidence in ripgrep. Okay, so we need to pass in a student to do this properly. And this is for other stuff that we have to get to later. I can see how this kind of all ties together. Man, this is pretty deep. Yeah, that's right, Shivans. That's there's just a lot to do. Okay, this one's a test. Thankfully, that's not so bad. And I think one of the items I have is to have a. What am I trying to say? I've got a stubbed out test for this whole project that might actually be more appropriate to put with getBreak instead of isBreak. So if we look back for to do 434, there was this test that I haven't written yet, and I was saying that we need to test it for the isBreak method. Maybe that's still true, but maybe we also need one for the getBreak method, because we've got 2 tests on getBreak, but we're going to need a third to account for students, probably. So we'll put that there. Oh, there it was, right? It's right above. And then we'll say test getBreak for student. I should get rid of that error. These are both still going to be failing. I'm going to watch the test suite fail, but let's go through this and annotate the other spots of getBreak. Already got that one, and then one more here, and this is in students, thankfully, so that one's going to be an easy one. In fact, let's just fix it right now. So we'll say student equals self, and so that we don't have to do that as a to-do. That should be, yeah. Let's just sanity check. This is the getWeek schedule method. It's on the student model. So in that method where getBreak is called, the self reference is going to be a reference to a student instance. So this is the right call there. Okay, return to that to-do list, and now we've got a more accurate listing of the places that we need to go fix. And I think the daily view might be a little simpler to start with, so let's start with that one. And then we'll finally get back to the web server and actually show what I was hoping to show when we started. So let's go to port 5000 and get logged in. Return to the app. Whoops. Well, already, okay. So that is the weekly view. This is demonstrating breakage clearly. Okay. Sorry, I keep pivoting here, but I'm trying to find the best way to show this. Maybe maybe what we should do, because we've got a bunch of tests. But let's get the test suite back to a passing state first, with maybe a not right answer, and then we've got the to-dos to continue to guide us afterwards. But I would like to start from a state where the test suite is passing. And so that's going to mean going to those get break method calls and fixing them to pass in a student, even if the student is not available at that spot. So let's go look for get break again. And we've got the one here on the weekly view, and we can pass in student equal none. That's not correct right now, but the student is not easily accessible at this scope, so we got to figure that out later. And again, here we don't have the student available, so we're going to say student equal none. And we're just going to do this in all these spots, and what that's going to do is satisfy the method signature, but the to-dos are going to keep us honest on what we really have to fix. And here's one where we would have lost this. So student 434. That's what we need to call these. That one is already fixed. That's great. That one's already okay. This one is the definition, so that's not a problem. And here we've got the two tests. I think I'm going to get these tests to pass. I'm going to do that with student equal none, which was an optional parameter that we could pass in. And then since we have a test down here to test the get break for the student, I'm not worried about this. So we're sort of testing the behavior with the optional none path and testing some of the other attributes of it, like looking for a null result like this test is supposed to be looking for. But we're also going to ultimately test it when the student parameter has a value. I just realized though that this has to have a keyword argument there. Okay, so we've got, I think that's all of the instances there. If we search for get break again, we can just kind of review the list and see student, definition. Well, then those are, yeah. I don't know why that, there's some weird stuff going on with ripgrep. This is not encouraging. See that error there? Like, I don't know why those are listed as errors. Not sure what's going on, but can't have a perfect environment all the time. Okay, let's try running PyTest again, see what happens. See if we missed any spots. And the interesting part is we will have a passing suite, but the behavior is wrong. It just kind of highlights you can have all of the unit tests in the world, you can have 100% test coverage, but if you're not testing the right thing, it doesn't mean squat. So those to-dos about the empty tests are definitely things that we need to fix that would have demonstrated that this is not working correctly if we had these written. So now we can finally load up the application, and that page that was previously failing should now pass because we've at least satisfied the method signature. Good, we have a break on this week. It should be easy to view, but let's go to the day view and let's look to tomorrow. Should be this guy. Okay. Oh, right. This gets more complicated than I even remembered. So here's the challenge. The break day concept, school break concept, used to be that what was global. So in other words, if you had a break day, it just applied to your family no matter what. So the logic here on this template is going to be such that it's just going to display this and not know how to display it per student. So the school break will be per student. So we're going to have to think about I'm going to basically have to reframe this. So we could still do, so if it applies for every kid in the family and like everybody that would be on the schedule, if they're all on break, we could still show this page right here. This is the simplest page for that. If there is a single student on a break, we need to differentiate between those. So that's actually that makes this this particular page more challenging. Whereas actually the week view is a simpler case in that regard. It's like no matter what, it's going to be displaying this whole set of 5 days. I'm still gonna stick with the daily one just because we don't need to keep bouncing around between stuff. But that's just something we'll have to figure out in this template logic when we work through this. And it explains some things about how this context is being built up. So we don't need this server right now. Let's work through the test. We know the behavior we want, and we can work it out. So let's bring back up the set of to-dos. Let's go to this spot right here. And really the to-do here, oh man, the logic, it's killing me. So here's that concept of global break, the is break day manifest. If we were to go to the daily template, we would see like this is break day Boolean is going to be checked before it loops over the schedules. I can almost guarantee that. I have not looked at that template in a while, so let's just make sure I'm being honest for a moment. And you can see where is break day? Okay. So that's even more complicated than that. So we take a different path if there's a presence of schedules. So this presence of schedules goes down to this path where it's going to show tables of data. That's the way this is designed currently. There is later on an empty block. So it's saying like if there are no schedules, then go down here. And this is the only place where is break day appears. So there's another condition in here. Wow. There's a lot of conditions in this stuff that kind of show this to be challenging. That's the interesting part about this app, as I mentioned previously. Like, I'm trying to make this as simple and friendly to the user as possible, and usually that means like below the surface is quite a bit of code for things. And here we're seeing that manifest. So what do we need? We need to change how all of this is handled to some sense. And I'm wondering if we could still manage to keep I'm wondering if we can get away with like having is break day apply to in the kind of current condition with this empty block. Like if we figured out that it was a break for both of the students of the day, could we bail out on calculating schedules and then keep this empty block as is? The empty block is only going to happen when the list of schedules has nothing in it, right? So when we're calculating the context down here with this get schedules function, see what this does is it is building a schedule for each student, and that's what's triggering the empty block of this or not. So if we can insert something right here to calculate basically is break day, if we could do that here somehow, then yes, it is. The source is available for this. Yep. You go to this repo. You can go pull this down on your own if you want. There you go. And I've even slapped an MIT license on that for now. I don't know if that's wise or foolish, but that's what I've done. So technically, if you wanted to start up your own homeschool app, you could, but please don't. That's all I can request. Maybe if I had real problems with it, I'd have to get more aggressive with the licensing, but I don't think it's enough of a problem. I'm in a small enough market where I don't anticipate people just straight up ripping off what I'm doing. Also, the app is sort of customized for my experience, so it wouldn't really make sense for a random person. I would not be opposed to more contributors, but and I have had people ask me that question before. So if you find something you're like, hey, I could really do this, then yeah, that'd be fine. If it was a feature change, I'd have to think a little harder on it because of what my users are actually requesting. But if you found fixed bugs or something, that would be interesting. Okay, so what I was getting at is like if we can get to the is break day, or if we calculate. Let me rephrase this. This logic is still kind of the thing that we want. But the problem here is that we need to get the whether this applies to all of the students or not at this stage right here. So we need to look, instead of it just being about one day, we need to ask, is it a break day for this student? Is it a break day for this student? And so on. So if you have multiple kids, that becomes any of those. If any of them, it's not a break day, then we have to put a schedule. So I still kind of want to have this return, but we have to change this aspect right here. And then I think we could leave the rest of this alone, and that would allow at least part of this problem to be resolved. And that part of the problem is leaving this empty block for the case when there are when there's totally nothing on the schedule. And if we do that, we also need to fix this to calculate for all of the students as well, and see, we could have a kind of a global, is it a break day or not? And then getting down into the actual student schedule, which is this method here, then we're going to have to do a break day check there. And if there is a break day for one particular student, then we could just somehow display that student is on a break and then show the schedule for the student that is not on a break. That one's a little bit more difficult. That one's where we'll probably have to put in a to-do comment until we actually have the data set up to really support this, because that one's going to be super hard to test visually. But I think that's the pattern that I want to look for here. Is like gotta figure out how to pass along. Like what we really need is something like is break for everyone. That's really what I'm trying to represent, I guess, now, and that's what is break day currently represents. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, I'm maybe not explaining myself well, and I apologize, and you all can ask me to be better about that. And I'm looking at the way this is built too. There's another aspect I don't necessarily even like about this, is like I already calculate is break day up here. You can see that here. And then I kind of come back and say, well, let me calculate it again here. Oh, there's a difference though. And there's this like runs on thing, which is something different. Okay, so we can't just use the same Boolean. Don't want to fall into the trap of making something overly general that wasn't meant to be. And I think that's probably what accounts for actually this. That's how this logic comes into play. Your students have no scheduled tasks today comes up when this check fails right here. Or maybe. Maybe not. Okay. So let's do this recalculation of break day Boolean. And yeah, I think that's what we want. So we have to do this, get students for school year. Maybe this belongs to be in its own little method because it'll just be easier to understand it that way. Let's start it with that and see how it goes. So let's say is break for everyone. And it's going to take a school year, a maybe school year. Remember, this is, well, maybe you don't remember, you can't see it from the code necessarily, but the school year may be a none object at this point in time, which is why there's the school year and check there. All right. And for the moment, let's just return true. Just want to get myself a good little starting point. Is this a break day for all students? That's what we're really after here. Let's ask it like a question. Why not? It's an interesting doc string. I don't know that I actually do that. I think I usually say something more. All right, I'm rethinking that. I usually say like check if this is a break day for all students. That makes it more imperative. So that is probably more of a it's just keeping with my style of using, and not just my style. Actually, here's an interesting tangent. There is a Python pep for doc strings, and I don't remember the number. 257. This is worth noting. Now, it's not like nobody mandates this by any means, but there are tools that can help enforce this. But what this will do is walk you through the reasoning behind why the Python community wants to document their stuff in a certain way. And in here, they actually note the tense that you should use on, let's see, whoops, wrong little window. Imperative? They don't use that kind of language. Verb? No. Okay, well, there is language in here, I promise, that says that you should start your doc strings with like the action, the actual command that you're trying to do. Like it says return the path name, so it's starting with the verb. Do I do doc strings on class-based views? I've been trying to put doc strings on most things these days, but I don't know that I'm 100% consistent with it. If we come up to this view, like here it is, this one. Now this is an old view. This is one of the original views in the app. It doesn't have a doc string, but it's pretty clear in its name. So most of the time, I think it's valuable to say what you're doing, and maybe that makes more sense for actions and stuff. Because you're right, it can get a little repetitive of if you're saying like you've got a noun and you've already given it like a descriptive labeling with the class name and given it a good one too, then do you need to add more? It could be argued no. I think with functions though, especially functions that execute a bunch of things, that there's some benefit there. Some people would disagree with me that a good method name or function name wouldn't require a doc string, but I've just found over time that like if you have one, then it becomes trivially easier to say like, all right, I have more to say about this. Let me expand this to a multi-line, and now I want to say, note, this is checking blah, blah, blah. And that's just, I don't know, just feels like good code hygiene to me. This is one where we can use, because this is school year, is going to be potentially optional. I would like to say optional school year. Is that going to work? It will. And then we also have to give this a return type. So let's give this the return type of bool. And that will help my editor in the future, and it will help keep me honest with MyPy when it checks for this stuff to say like if I've handled the condition. Now here's where, so if I just directly tried to say school year, let's see if MyPy will actually catch this actually. School year is break, and pass in none for now. What is MyPy going to catch this? Oh, it's catching a different, so I'm not passing in the right break. Okay. How about date? Do I have date time available? Probably do. Just say date time today and student equal none. Give it the type signature. Oh, come on. Date today. Yeah. Here we go. This is the MyPy syntax check that I wanted. So look at the bottom of my Vim editor and you see item none of optional school year has no attribute isBreak. So this is trying to tell you, hey, you're going to hit a none type error if you try this, potentially, whenever the school year is none. So if we fix this by saying if school year is none, then we want to bail out early and return false. There's nothing we can do. It's a break for everyone because there's no school year. It's like a nonsensical question to ask. And notice what happened with MyPy. MyPy detected that I did a none check. And because it knows that this is impossible to get to with none now because of that if clause, we can successfully proceed. So this is how the optional annotation is actually helping us write better code that is protecting us from ourselves. Okay. Now, we don't need this yet. We will in a minute, but we don't need that yet. So right now, I'll just start off with, we've immediately got our guard clause. This is going to cause us something extra to test, so we might actually rephrase that in the future, but we'll see. The next thing we want is we need to loop through the students for the school year. So this is really what we are after. So at this point, we should have an actual school year object. You know, now I'm curious. Let's go. It doesn't like that is not valid Python, so it barfed on me. Let's go up to the student models and let's look at for that particular model. So to get the student for and see if it already handles or get students for. It might already handle the none case. Nope, I didn't put a type annotation on here, so I'm not helping myself. And I haven't done this consistently, but as the project grows in scope, I probably should add more annotations because now I don't know. I mean, I guess I can inspect this code, so it's possible that, you know, school year could be none here. Maybe I figured it didn't matter, but I don't know if the intent was this should be called to the school year or not. It doesn't look like it's really designed for that. Anyway, that kind of information can really improve what you see in your editor and what you get in your experience. So we want to check for each of the students, and we want to call the isBreak method for the students, and they all have to be, in order for this to be true, it has to be all of them. So let's do this as a list comprehension because I think we can get away with it. Or actually, it doesn't need to be a list comprehension. It needs to be a generator expression at least. And we can say return, what can we say? We want to say, I think it's this syntax right here. We can put this as a parenthesis to make it a generator expression, and then we can say school year is break. Whoops, I forget. I guess we immediately are missing something. Yes, and generally I think I have mixed feelings about the generator stuff and memory and computation. I'll get to that in just a second. What are we checking for? We're checking for a break. And I think in the other one I called it a day. So let's call it a day to use the same language. So that's missing from here. So this needs to be a day, and that's going to be a date, time, date, right? And then we can finally finish this off by saying day, and then student equals student. Okay. And incompatible, yeah, it needs to be all. So we're going to use the built-in function all. And then what's inside here is a generator, technically. And it doesn't need the parentheses because we're putting it inside as a function argument, and so the parentheses become unnecessary. I want to check on one aspect of this. Yeah, I was afraid of that. So when you have an empty list, all will return true. And is that really what we want? Like, if there are no students in the school year, is it a break for everyone? Yeah, I guess technically it is. It may not be a condition that actually happens, but if you have no students, well, that maybe gets philosophical. If you have no students in a school year and you're asking if it's a break for everyone, it's kind of true because there are none, so they're on a break. Or you could say it's actually false because there are none, and so there's nothing to say it's a break for. And maybe the for everyone might lean me towards the false, but I don't think it's going to matter. It's probably really what it gets down to. As for the generator stuff, so I'm generally a fan of generators. They're great. They are valuable over list comprehensions. There are some downsides to generators in that they run out. Like with a list comprehension, like actually allocating the memory, you can loop over it multiple times. With a generator, it kind of, you exhaust it and then it's done. So you just have to be aware of that. I think is the way that goes. And then the memory argument is like, okay, we might be saving a tiny bit of memory, but does it matter for what would amount to like a list of, on average, even really big families of what, 6 people? Yeah, that would be a big family. For us, this would be an object with 2 things in it for my family. Okay, so I think this is the method. We're now checking the day. That's what we really care about. Check if this is a break day for all students. And so we're saying if it's not a school year, get out of here, it doesn't matter. And then we want the condition to be, you have to be a break for every student in order for that to be considered valid. And so what this is going to do under the covers eventually is going to do an is break calculation, get all the students, the school breaks for this student, check if it is one or not, go to the next student, check if it is. And there's actually a handful of queries here that's going to populate a cache at least, but there's a cost there that's kind of hidden with this is break method. Okay, but now that we have it, we can say, we can do this. We can replace this Boolean with self is break for everyone and give it the day and the school year, and that should be sufficient for that chunk of code. Okay. I'm thinking about how to handle this schedules stuff. As I said, there's actually like 2 conditions in here. And the difference between them is this school year runs on thing. But if you squint, line 272 and line 274 are the isBreak day calculation that we just did up here. So can we avoid doing that again? That would be nice. So maybe we pass this down into the schedule, get schedules thing. Yeah, I think that's the right thing to do. Let's pass this down into isBreak for everyone, put that in there, and then come down to here. And we still need, in order to do this properly for the runs on check, we still need a school year, so we'll leave that part. But this part where it's actually calculating the break day, we can now flip this around and just call isBreak for everyone here. And so we get that, and then we will get up here and say context is break day. I don't like when Black does this. I mean, I get it. I get why it's doing it, but this feels, what I especially don't like about it is I'm pulling out of the context in order to set what could be a local variable. So let's refactor this. Let's take this and say is break day. We'll assign it to a local Boolean. Then we'll assign that to this context. And then we can say is break day, like so, and it will probably go back to being one line if I get the syntax right. Okay, that cleans it up a little bit. So local variable help winning here. So we have addressed now the this matters per student thing here. I think that's right. But remember, I said there's kind of two conditions that are at play. There's one for when it's a break for everyone, which is what this is break day thing. But there's also this now new problem to solve when the break applies for per student. And I'm going to move this to comment. So this matters when one of the students, or at least one of the students has a break. Right? Because this is that new condition that we've got, a new state in the problem space of there's a partial break where we need to show the daily schedule for some, but not for others, that we'll have to address. And maybe this one is not worth trying to solve yet, because why? We don't actually have the ability to test this. So, and really the implementation is going to be even deeper down. So it's not even here. It is down a level in here. So the actual get student schedule calculation, where it's doing that stuff, is in this gnarly method, unfortunately. It's less gnarly on the daily one. The weekly one's even worse. But I don't know that I wanted to get into that aspect right now until we do some data stuff. Let's try running PyTest and see if we broke anything. Maybe there's some tests I'm missing. That's possible. I don't really know. The core test passed, which kind of indicates there's probably not anything that we really broke. Great. So the refactoring so far has gone well. And gosh, how much do I have in this? Yeah, this is getting to be a big chunk of work. I'm wondering if I should do this in a branch. Give myself like, I'm torn. So here's what I would do at work, and in a lot of projects. Anytime I'm collaborating with other people, I would make a new branch, and I'd put this stuff on a branch, and I'd be very liberal about committing to it. when it's been just me, I'm okay committing straight to the master branch, or the main branch. I still haven't renamed mine. I should eventually, but it's still called master for now. And I've been okay just making these little incremental changes. Also, there is, as this change is getting bigger, and knowing that it's going to create some data change, there's probably worth some value putting this in a separate branch, knowing that if a customer said, hey, Matt, something's really broken here, or if I got some kind of error reporting from Rollbar, if I committed this as is, I think it's still okay, but maybe not for long. We're kind of at the edge of where I'm going to have to commit to some actual data changes. So I think it makes sense to put this on a branch. It might also give us a chance to put this on a pull request so I can like see the diff of what's out there and some other things. So let's do that. And how many branches do I have? I just have some Dependabot stuff. So you can see how rarely I do this. So let's create a branch. So git checkout, that's what that is, -b. And we'll say, what is this? What does this work? SchoolBreak for students. And I will go ahead and commit it. All right. And so far what we've done is we've added the student to isBreak and getBreak APIs. That's kind of where we're at. All right. So now we have these changes on a branch, and I can switch to some other work if I needed to go fix a problem in production. So this is probably a healthy place to be. And I haven't committed that work to master. Okay. Let's return to this list of to-dos then, now that we have done that, and see what's left. So we knocked off one of these spots in the daily view. And I think we can't really do this other one in the daily view until we do some data handling. And in fact, now that I say that, that's probably true of the weekly view too. Like until we're actually able to differentiate between the different types of school breaks, I don't know that we can really fix these things, truly. Or we can fix them, but it's really speculative because the API itself hasn't been changed. Okay. Now, let's talk about the year calendar. The year calendar is used where? Okay. Just convincing myself of where it's used and making sure I'm talking about the right thing. Fire up the app server. Close that PEP. So on the school year, this is the year calendar. So it's this thing that shows breaks. And I think I said actually, this is the one of the spots in the apps where it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter that that it's going to be none. It doesn't matter which student is affected. So this is I think the one time where we actually can just say it can be none, which is really good because this one is going to be a pain to like correct. So let's go back to the to-dos, and it was in the year calendar, and I was concerned that the breaks would be a problem here. So we want to show all breaks for all students, and so we can leave it as none, which is going to be the behavior that I want when I want to show all. Yeah, in fact, let's document that. Why not? When student is none, get the breaks that apply to all students. Okay. So this one we can actually just delete. That one's an easy one. We thought through the logic and have confirmed that that's what it needs to be. That drops our to-do list down one. And we've now got the test. So do we want to write the test first, or we want to write the model change first? I guess we can do this little test-driven development. And then I'll talk through, maybe in that process, I'll talk through what I've been thinking about for the actual model change that I want to make. The get break for student is the one that's closer to the actual problem. Remember, is break is like a wrapper around get break. So that's really, if you test get break, you're kind of actually testing is break. So we may actually decide to delete this test. All this test would do is prove that the wiring of student is being passed through appropriately, like right here, which is pretty trivially easy to verify, and this is a keyword only argument. So yeah, that would be all we'd be testing is, did we connect this properly? And as I'm saying that, that is like convincing me more and more I don't want this test. I think it's going to be redundant. So we got one test to add. So we want to get a break. There's actually multiple tests now that I'm thinking this through. They're just all related to the same method. So get a break for a student, for a break that applies to all students. So that's one. And this will make sense when I discuss the modeling in a second. We want another one that is, so this is get break for, I don't know, we'll say all students. And now this is get a break for a student, for a break that applies to that student only. This is where I need to talk about how I have been thinking about modeling this. Bring up the model, and let's bring up the options. Talked about foreign key. I've pretty much ruled out the foreign key approach. I'm not going to go that route. So I am going to go with the many-to-many. But I need to think about, what does it mean when, or which ways do I want to create this data? With a many-to-many, there's multiple tables involved, right? Well, maybe that's new to you. I don't know. The many-to-many relationship works by saying, I've got a SchoolBreak model, and I've got a student model, and I want to be able to associate multiple students to a single SchoolBreak, and then to another SchoolBreak potentially. That's what makes it the many part. So you could, both of my kids could be, Christmas. They both be on the same SchoolBreak, and 4th of July, American Independence Day, same SchoolBreak. And so two of them apply to the two of them. That's what makes it many-to-many. I'm probably beating that over the head. I apologize if you know what that is. So there's a question though of, how do I interpret it when I have a SchoolBreak, but I need to pause. So the way to make that many-to-many relationship work is there's actually a third table that comes into play. And Django sometimes calls this a through model. So you can define this explicitly, or you can leave it implicit. But whenever you define a many-to-many field, there's a third lookup table that is created. And that table has both foreign keys. It has entries of both foreign keys. So if I have my son and my daughter, and I have Christmas, I could make 2 entries for each of them. And then if I have my son and my daughter, and I have Independence Day, I can make 2 entries for each of them. The foreign keys of one and the foreign keys of the other, that would make 2 rows, and then the foreign keys of one and the foreign keys of the students, I would make another 2 rows, so for a grand total of 4. The thing that I've been asking myself is, do I want to force the app so that it has to have a many-to-many for every SchoolBreak? And that's, how do I express this properly? let me write it down and see if it comes up a little better than what I'm trying to say, and I'll get some thoughts down here. So let's see. We'll say selecting this one. So a school break. What does it mean when you have a school break with no many-to-many relations? In other words, we've explicitly not connected Christmas to my son and my daughter. That could mean either one of two things. We could either interpret it to mean, or it might mean more things. These are two things that I think it could interpret. If there are none, you can view this as it represents a break for all of them. So if no many-to-many, school break applies to all students. Or if no many-to-many, the school break applies to no students. So it's two kind of views on it. It's like, so the end effect is do I want to view this as the school break by itself could have meaning? Or do I want to interpret it as when I want to do a query of is my son or my daughter on a break, the only table that I really care about is the many-to-many table itself. And I think this is a really important distinction on how I view this, because if I take this view that when there's no many-to-many relations on a particular school break, that it applies to all the students, it's kind of a default case. I think this is actually the one I want to select, and I'll try and justify it. And you can see if I'm crazy or not. If I take this route, what does that mean for the app today? It means that I don't have to do any kind of migration to the existing data on the app, because in the current system, the live system, their breaks already exist. And so if there are no many-to-many relations, which would be the scenario, because this table doesn't even exist yet, this third intermediate table does not exist yet, there's no data in there, and so school breaks would continue to operate as normal. The other advantage that I think I saw with this is what happens when I create a new student. If I create a new student and I take this second view, well, before I get into more of those detailed ones, let's explain what this one would look like. With this, and what it would mean for data migration. If I did it this way, where if there's no many-to-many and school breaks apply to no students, then I had better be careful to roll out that data change first so that I can take all the existing school breaks and create entries in that third intermediate table for every student. So if my kids have Christmas off this year, which they would, then I want to make sure that continues to work. I don't want to suddenly basically make it look like all of the breaks disappear because I haven't populated the intermediate table. And as I thought through this, I thought about, the number of students could be changing. And so if I wanted to take this approach where breaks only counted by what's in that many-to-many reference table, then I'd have to do some bookkeeping every time I add a new student, which is okay. It's not the end of the world, but I think I'd want to be more forgiving. So if you were to add new students, there's just not that bookkeeping to do. So that's why I leaned towards this approach of no many-to-many means that it is a break that applies to everybody. The downside of this approach, and the reason why this isn't a slam dunk in my head of why this is valuable, is because what it will mean for that get break method. So I have perhaps saved on some bookkeeping complexity by not taking this approach, but it does mean that the querying complexity is now increased, because in order to figure out is a break day for a student, I now have to do, I'm not sure if it will come out as 2 queries or if it will come out as a query with some kind of a join in it. Or maybe it's just a couple of where clauses. I really don't, I'm not sure yet. Because what it would mean is I have to take the summation of the school breaks that have no many-to-many relations on it and add to that the school breaks that are just for one particular student. So that, yeah, that's the scenario. So it's like we'll have to see how we can represent that, and maybe in that process of doing this get break calculation, I find that kind of querying is painful. In which case, then we can go back and consider the bookkeeping, because as I'm talking through this right now, like literally on the stream, I'm realizing that the bookkeeping is maybe not horrible. Like, how many times would I have to add breaks for a new student that is added? Yes, it could happen, but where would that happen? That would happen in one place in the code, the actual student create page where you create a student, and I could go pull all the breaks right then and there, and delete them. Add the new references in the table. There's maybe other bookkeeping that I'm not thinking of, because if it was a foreign key constraint that cascaded, then if I deleted the student for some reason, it would also delete the references in the middle table. So that's not a bookkeeping that we'd have to keep track of. I think I'm leaning towards this approach. I think it's going to be what I want to do. Maybe I'll regret that, but I'm trying to make a decision and not spend too much time on it. So I think we're going to say selecting this one. The part that I do like about it is no data migration either. That's really a nice benefit. Okay. And this is actually what triggers me to say that I need multiple tests. So a moment ago I said, like, I have to, if I have this view where the many-to-many means different things, then we need to test that we get the right break for a school break that applies to all students, and then we also need to test for a break that filters to a specific student. And probably should write a negative test as well. I bet there's a truth table in there actually that says we would need to check for, are we making sure we don't get one by accident. Maybe that would be worthwhile to do as well. Okay. Again, I hope that made sense. If it didn't, holler at me, because I'm trying, but sometimes these concepts are challenging to express. All right. So before we can even write the test then, we need the actual many-to-many relation on the model. And I'm going to be honest, I need to go reference the documentation. I don't write many-to-many fields enough to remember that off the top of my head. I know they are in the field documentation for the Django database ORM, but I want to make sure we look at it and see. Like, I think there are things that I think, for example, I don't think it needs to define an on delete behavior, but I need to confirm that. So Django many-to-many field is the thing that we are going to be using. Yeah, you can see there's nothing added to this. It's just the one thing. The other thing I want to weigh very carefully. Oh, come on. Where's the through model defined? Through. That's going to be a terrible thing to search for. There it is. I don't know why we weren't finding that initially. So as I've been referring to, this table is going to have, it's going to be two tables kind of merged into one in this reference table. And Django calls this a through table or through model. And you can see here from this documentation that it will automatically generate this table. However, you can read the however. We can, if we wanted to, specify the intermediate table ourselves. And we could specify that as a model. I think the example that they give, do they show the example? Yeah, here we go. This is a good example of why you might want to do this. So we have a person, we have a group, and here is the actual, if this many-to-many field, a group can have many people in it, a person can belong to many groups, so that's what makes it many-to-many. And so they are specifying that the through model is a membership. So if there is additional information that is relevant to that particular relationship, the relationship itself, then having this through model gives you more control. And if you don't pick this, you sort of seed that, and not like seed doesn't, I mean CEDE, I think that's how you spell that, right? You give up that control to Django, which may not be bad if you don't need the extra power and the expressiveness. And I was chatting with my wife about this, I mean, not in these terms, but about needing extra data for, like, is there any extra data that makes sense when we're factoring in a break that is specific to a student? Does that matter? And the answer was basically no, not really. There were some things that she would like to see on the break itself that the SchoolBreak could have, like some kind of a notes field or more detailed notes. But it wasn't strictly anything else that made sense. At least through dinner conversation, we didn't like dig into it super deep. So there could be something that we're missing, but I don't think this is like an undoable change. I think it's a little harder if I know it's a little harder if I wanted to introduce this field later, but I'm pretty sure it's doable if I wanted to introduce my own through model. So what we're going to do is not do that. We're going to punt on that and treat it as something that Django can control itself. And this is the pretty good documentation about what's actually going on. I've sort of tried to describe this as best I can, and I think I've gotten this pretty accurate, but I don't think I've actually read this paragraph in a long time, or maybe ever. Oh, it's a comment about table names and stuff. Okay. So we want to go to the model, and we want to go to the SchoolBreak, or the SchoolBreak model. And here is where we're going to add in the reference to this other field. And I want to call this many-to-many field. This is going to be students, because we're on the SchoolBreak side of this. There's the other challenge with many-to-many field is you can put it in either side. And so maybe we should pause and make sure, does it make sense to have this on the SchoolBreak side, or does it make sense to have this on the student side? And there's probably ways that we could ask this in either sense. SchoolBreak model is definitely smaller than the student model, so that kind of reduces the complexity. There's a temptation to put stuff into like the really common classes, like a user model, kind of the God model idea. And so there's an argument to be said of putting new data or new attributes on a lesser used class and just kind of reframe how you're asking it to kind of spread out the load. And I think I might use that reasoning for this case, because in actuality, the many-to-many thinking that I probably want to have is like a student has school breaks. Does it make sense for school breaks to have students. Maybe less so. Let me pause here and make sure I don't commit something that's foolish. Because I don't want to put this on this model just because it's smaller. That's not a good reasoning by itself either. So let's think about if it were on the students model, or what else could we consider with this? I think there might be other factors here. Yeah, there's definitely at least one. Is that true? Oh, no. It's actually the opposite of what I thought. So this schools app is importing the student model, and I think we did that last week for the type checking. And I was crossing my fingers that we could get away with it. I kind of, in the hierarchy of things in this app, I think as the school is being more basic than a student, but I guess they're both equally primitive and important concepts in this app. So I was trying to think of like, if I needed to import one versus the other, would one make more sense than the other? And I thought for sure I would see some importing of the schools app into the student app, but I don't see that. So maybe that's another point in favor of using the ManyToManyField here on the SchoolBreak itself. Let's try this. I mean, this is not set in stone yet. And as I said, this could go on either side. So we could put this here and decide, it doesn't really fit, or it doesn't like read well, and then move it over and kind of reframe and put it instead on the student. And the other option, so like to present the two options, we could do school breaks here. Like what school breaks do you have? And have that ManyToManyField, or students over here. And even as I type that out, it's also pushing me to SchoolBreak. And why? So let's talk about this. What if we do school breaks here and say, well, just imagine the rest of it with the ManyToManyField. As I said, if in my interpretation of having a school break with no many-to-many be a break that applies to all students, then if I did school breaks all right here, like and actually use the many-to-many query set manager, whatever it is that the ManyToManyField would have on it, and did all, it would be inaccurate because it would not factor in it would only factor in the ones that do exist in that many-to-many reference table. So I don't think I like that. I think it would be deceptive. Here, I at least know that, well, students may be there for a school break or they may not, and that feels more right to me. Okay, enough justification. Get on with it. What movie is that from? Monty Python? Search for the Holy Grail. I think there's a scene in there about that. All right, so we've got the ManyToManyField on the student, and we've called it students because it will be a plural thing. This is going to, when we have the students, the type on this is not going to be, well, the way you'd access the data on it is with some other kinds of queries. It acts more like a manager than it does a field itself. So let's leave that there, and let's return to the test. And okay, this is where my memory is getting fuzzy. Like, how do we actually create the through model entry? It's with, you treat it like a set, I think. We need to find some good example here. So this is the foreign key, ManyToManyField, blah, blah, blah. Here are the things that are on it. This is not a symmetrical thing. That doesn't really matter. So I think there's some operations on the field that can add it. Well, shoot. Where's the documentation for this stuff? Maybe we can stick them in the reference. Many to many. That's going to take me back to the reference. I'm pretty sure they give an example somewhere, but something like add, and this is really basic stuff, so clearly I forget things. This is trying to show an example where you have the through model defined. So they're able to say, they're able to create this explicitly and call save on it, but that's not what we can do. Oh, here we go. Add, create, set. Yeah. Add. So we have to do it like we would have SchoolBreak.students.add, and then we would say add the student. And does that save automatically? I think it does. This is how long it's been, y'all, since I've been worked on many stuff. Okay. So we also have to think about the relationship here. There's more to this. But I think now that we have the ManyToManyField, even without writing the migration or creating the migration, we can test this out, because PyTest will do a migration-free mode that will just basically assume, at least in the default mode, that that migrations are my state of my database matches what shows up in the models. I have it set so that when I run this in CI, it actually doesn't do that. So there's actually in PyTest Django, let's see if we can find that really quickly. So you can see here, I've got the no migrations option here. This is actually a cool little tip. So if you want to speed up your testing, if you're writing tests, it is faster to turn off migrations. Because that way, if you turn this off, if you don't have this, what's going to happen is when PyTest starts up, it will have to run migrations in order to populate like the database that it's going to use for the test run. So it does with the migrations enabled, it creates a blank database. It runs through all the migrations, and then it like commits that as a transaction in that local in-memory database, or however you have it set up, and then it will run all the tests. With the and that will check the state of your migrations, basically check that everything's working correctly. That takes more time though, because it has to run all of those migrations in sequence as it, or whatever the graph puts together from the migration system, and eventually it will linearize and run those in a sequence. That takes time, especially as you have more and more migrations. So if you keep it with like this no migrations option, essentially what it does is it jumps straight to the end, straight to the answer of what you want the final state to be with your model state, and commits just that set of change in one change. And so it's very quick to do that, and then it can run your tests. So this is nice for the speed benefits that come with your local test suite. However, you probably still want to run and check that your migrations are right, correct? So what I have in my CI setup, yeah, you can see when I have my coverage run, I'm actually running with the migrations flag explicitly turned on. So it overrides this config file setting here because I'm calling it from effectively the command line or the bash shell. And what that's going to do is then go through that sequence of migrations. And so it's going to be a little slower in CI, but presumably you don't care about that. You've already run it elsewhere. And you're going to get the benefit of you're actually checking your migrations. So I've liked this approach so far. It's worked pretty well for me. And but it kind of highlights, at least right now, of why we don't have to write that migration yet. If I had it flipped so that I'm always running with the migrations locally, then even trying to run the tests, that would fail, because it's going to detect that I have this many-to-many field that's not defined, and it's going to say you haven't run all the migrations. Okay, so we can't affect the getBreak method yet, but we can go over and at least write a test now. So this first test that we want to write, we want a SchoolBreak. So let's do SchoolBreak, and we'll say the SchoolBreak factory. I can't even type anymore. School, 2 L's. So this is a SchoolBreak. It's not going to have any of the many-to-many relationship on it. So this is the case where I'm now treating a SchoolBreak that has no relations. So this should apply to all students. So if I write this test and I need to have let's keep this. Let's say okay. Let's call this one the expected SchoolBreak. Or you know what? Let's flip this around. I'm going to do it like it is in this test up here. Let's get the school year, and then we'll take this SchoolBreak factory, and we will say sorry, y'all. I keep flip-flopping. I'm going to take it from the one that actually created a SchoolBreak before. That's more accurate. So what we still want that same assertion. And this test should pass. Like, there's nothing about this. We haven't changed any logic. So effectively, we are replicating the behavior of test has SchoolBreak. But now we've got it with, oh, interesting. Why did that? Huh? I did not expect that. School year, getBreak. What happened? Well, this is fun. A little fun adventure. Where'd you go? How is this? Does this test still work? How are they different? What? I mean, they must be different, right? Yes. Okay. I see it now. That's how they're different. The start date and the SchoolBreak have a different. They don't match up. Okay. Start with a baseline of sanity. That's a good thing. Now we need a student that is going to map to this. And so we have to create a student that is in the school year. So the student has a reference to the school. If we look at the school models, I don't know why I keep closing all these files. I need to leave some of them open. So is break. We dig in here. It does SchoolBreaks by date, which is a property. And it goes over. So we are actually going to have to even push this down further. The and make this stop being a property. It no longer works as just a property anymore. But we'll get to that in a minute. And what can we say about this? My brain just spaced out for a second and lost myself. Oh, I was trying to say, like, what student does this have to apply to? Maybe that doesn't matter at this stage. I think as long as we get, because this is going to have to receive a student now. All right, I'm getting there. Getting my head on straight. So we're going to get a student from up here. So I don't think it matters if the student is technically in this school year or not. In reality, it will matter, but the only times it will ever be called are students that are already in the school year. So I think we can get away with saying, just give me a student. I think that'll work. And then we can replace here with student. Now this should still pass. Again, there's no logic change yet. But what we want is, oh, this is tricky, because this is also going to, so even if we wrote this test and added the SchoolBreak, the many-to-many relation here, this would also pass in the current state. So it's only going to be when we like want the negative state, maybe, that we would actually catch this problem. It's interesting. All right, let's go ahead and put down most of the same tests for the other one, and you'll see the difference. We've got the same content here. We're not working on anything else right now, so let's get rid of the to-do section so you can actually see. So we've got the two isBreak or getBreak tests here. They're both identical at this point. The difference that we want to add is that we want to say expected SchoolBreak dot students dot add student. That's the new addition. Again, though, this test will still pass because it doesn't care. All right, you added this extra record to this middle reference table, but who cares? So, and this is still the answer that we want. We want then this to return a break when that happens. So it goes to show that there's like, even though we've done nothing, this code is still really broken because we have not asserted like the negative case of when this should really fail. So now, do I want to write this as yet another test, or do I want to make this test a little bit more robust? So what if we did it this way? What if we had another student so that there's an other student? And now what we want is, if we make this about the other student, so this is where we can make this thing break. So we want the SchoolBreak that's returned, this needs to be none. Why? So remember, in this new definition that we've got, a SchoolBreak either counts if it applies to everybody, so that first test is okay, or if it applies just to you. But if it applies to some other student, it should not apply to you. Yeah, I think that's accurate. So I think this is the right test. I think I finally see a failure because of course it's going to keep returning a break because again, we haven't factored in this logic yet. All right. So I think this is a set of 3 tests that cover the case. Two tests. But we've got the negative case here. So maybe, do we need the positive case still? Probably. All right. So let's keep this one as is. Copy it first, rename it, and then go back and fix this up to be like the positive case. So this will be the positive case where the school break is equal to the expected break. Whoops, expected. So that should still pass. I didn't rename this, so it was actually calling this one. Get break for student with get break for other student break. So let's see, getting a break for a student. I'm not saying this well. How can we shorten this? A break for another student will return none. For a different student. Man, I'm not sure I like how I'm writing that, but it's the truth. It just feels awkwardly said. That's what happens when you write doc strings late at night. Okay. And then we want to, we want to keep that add. That's still right. So this one passes. This one fails. Yeah, cool. And my claim, we'll see if you believe me, is that if we get this method right, and we've gotten this core method down, and we can make this isBreak logic work, and then we've plumbed this through everywhere else, then we've kind of like done the work. Now there are those spots that I said we couldn't actually prove it until we got the data in there. We have to go back and fix those up. But I think that this is kind of the core of this. We have to be a little bit thoughtful about this though. So currently the way this get break, what happens with this is for a particular school year, this is a little local cache. So this is a dictionary, and you can actually see, put the type check on here. So this is a dictionary of dates with school breaks as the thing that gets returned. And that is okay, but it's not a deep enough depth because it doesn't factor in the students now. So there's more dimensions that apply here. So instead of having a flat dictionary that is just date, school break, and then having like a list of those. So this is kind of what school breaks by date is right now. What we need is another dimension on here that says, like it basically needs to be wrapped up like this. It needs to be the student is the key now, and the value is the list of their applicable breaks. So you have to kind of go in one more level to do the lookup. That gives us the two dimensions, have two different sets. So we can cache this still the same way, but the cache has to be populated per student. And you'll still get most of the benefit. So there will be a query per student, and that's okay. Like it's less than ideal, but it's okay. So what do we have to do to do this? I don't know that we're going to be able to use cache property anymore, which means we might have to do the caching a little bit more manually. So it's kind of a bummer. But we can do it. That's what we're going to have to change, though. So we have to change the body of this get break thing to not just be this cache property. That's the goal. And we have the test. I don't want to write like another test for this. Like the current tests kind of already prove that this little cache thing works. And this while loop works, and yeah, it all works out. So I hope there's enough confidence here. Yep. And the nice part about this is like, okay, let's imagine that this does happen for if we're well, shoot, maybe that's not true. All right, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I apologize. Let's get back to this. So it's, again, because this is where this dichotomy of thinking about school breaks as doing two different things is really going to matter. So we can't just query on all the breaks. That doesn't make all the sense anymore. We still do want to get the breaks for the school year. That's true, but there's more to it than that. So there's a filter that needs to go on here. And it might be that, well, I'm not going to worry about too much about performance at this point. I don't think it really is that relevant. So what is the right filter that we need, and how do we get the student in there? So let's ignore the cache property aspect of this for the moment. And in fact, let's not even delete this yet. We're really going to change the implementation, use this as a reference point, and make our own new thing here. So if we want to do a break, so there's probably going to be like, what? There will be a lookup table. We can do this as two layers, maybe another function call first. That is def get break. Is that going to actually help us? Probably not. Let's just put all the logic, ram it all in here, and then we'll refactor if we need to. Let's comment out this line. And for the moment, return none as a safe return. And kill the web server. That's not doing us any good over there. So remember, I said the breaks for a student will be one of two things. It'll be student breaks with no M2M and plus student breaks for that student, where the many-to-many does exist. So we can do this kind of in the naive way, and then just like do two queries and put them in a dictionary and use that as, like when I had that structure earlier, as that part of that nested thing, and then attach the student to that, and that's kind of what we're going for. And then we just need to set up the access pattern and to get to that data. We'll have to do the caching on that part in a minute. So let's say all student breaks for everyone. Now this is actually interesting because we want to filter out breaks that exist in the many-to-many table. So how do we do that? This is the question. So it's going to be breaks. That's from the school year. That much we know. There's a filter here that we want to apply. What is that filter? That filter has to be when students is none, but I don't know that that's going to work. Because like it's not just null, or what is the query set thing for this? Django query set, I think it's is null. No M to M. Maybe there's a good answer here. Got a good trusty old Stack Overflow. What? Is that really the answer? That'd be awesome if it is. Oh man, that's amazing. That's super cool. Whoa, what did I do wrong? Too many. Okay. Can we do this in one? All right, let's take a look at your question here, Shivans. Yeah, I didn't say it would be quick. I'm okay. I'm okay with that. You have a detail view for a user. Okay. The view will access another model. Okay. It should populate events linked to the user by a foreign key lookup. You say one to many is a question mark. There is a serializer already. So we're talking DRF then? If we're got serializers in the mix, is that accurate? If that's accurate, because I think it's going to affect my answer. Yeah, okay. So serializers. So you have like an API call, is what you're really saying. You don't have like a, or is that fair? Is it more of an API call than a detail view? Because I think detail view and I think like Django server rendered detail view. Okay. So you're trying to get some data. Okay, I think I get you now. Let me see. Let me type this out and see if I've got you right, and like you can check me if I'm off. So let's say you've got. Let's just assume you have an authenticated user. I'm just going to make that assumption, and you are doing API. Yeah, and you're going to query your widget, okay, and your widget model has a foreign key to something else. So doodad. I don't know. Models foreign key. Maybe this is actually backwards. Okay, user. So actually, all right. So you have it kind of gets down to like the one-to-many relationship that you're going for. So you're saying you have a widget and it has a foreign key to the user. Is that right? Or you called it event or something earlier. Maybe that's more accurate. You've got foreign key to user. Does that look right to you? Okay. And are you querying? Okay, event. Cool. Are you querying your API for the user, or are you querying for the widget? or are you doing API for the event? Which one of those two are you asking about? Query for the user. And you want to include events. So let's get rid of that one. You want to include event data with this user query? Is that right? Because you could do that. I don't know that I would recommend that path, but you could do that. So yeah, it's okay. I'll present both cases, and I'll let you decide on which one you think is better. So with your user model, or with your DRF API, you could write a serializer. So you've got your user serializer, and what is it? Serializers. You maybe you even have a model serializer, and you've got serializer use meta or not? Yeah, I think it does. Class meta model equal user. If I'm steering you wrong, let me know, but this is roughly what I think it's going to look like. And maybe we'll just leave it at first name for the moment, and you can extrapolate to like, well, let's do two things, like ID and first name. All right. So here's a serializer, basic serializer. Now, if you wanted to include events data with this user API call, what you would do is something like this. You would say, you would add events. So even though it's not on your model field, you would add it. And then you would say events is equal to, this is where you'd write another serializer. And the key, this is the important part, you would say many equal true. Okay? And so the payload that you would get for this in DRF would be like, you would get the user and I'm going to ignore all the stuff that with pagination and other things that might come out, but like a single instance, you'd get your ID, you'd get your first name, you'd get, and this isn't even a valid JSON thing, but just work with me. And then you'd get your list of objects for whatever is in that event serializer. So if your event serializer has like, your events maybe have a start or something, there'd be like a start time, start date, and so on. So that is one path. Okay. Let me pause there. Did that make sense to you? Does this match up with your expectation? Does it connect some dots? I don't know. Does this work? All right, while you're typing out that response, I'll start crafting up another way to look at this. So, okay. Another way to do this is, well, again, it depends on, maybe I'll present two ways, but I'll present the one where, let's just assume that the only person ever accessing this event stuff is the current authenticated user. In which case, you could do a separate call where you have events as your API call, and then in your DRF API view, you could use, where would you do this? You can use get query set. Oh my word, can't type at the moment. And so this is, I'm kind of like deep in writing crap here, so I apologize. So let's assume you've got your events API view. It is a retrieve or a list API view or something like that. I don't remember the exact generics that they have. You can define the query set, and you can either Now, if you look at the DRF documentation, you can either define query set to say like something generic like event.objects.all and have it work for all of that. And that's if you like you don't need any fancy filtering or anything on it. But the other way that DRF is going to work, or another way that it can work, is by defining and overriding the getQuerySet method. So here you could say return, oh my word, return event objects filter, and then say that your user is the self request user. Now you'd want to do the check to make sure this is authenticated and blah blah blah. So you'd put in the right mix-in to do that. But this is the way with like an API events thing. If you wanted to just get the events separately, that you could do that for an individual user. Okay, so that's like option 2. Let's say though that you needed to do something where like it's not just about the authenticated user, like the user that you could be querying for could change. In that case, maybe you want to do API users and have like your users API. And I don't know how your API is structured, but let's assume for the moment that you're doing something like a primary key. And so, or the ID field, another parlance. And then you want to have it like be below there. Okay, at this point, now, if you have a DRF view hooked up to this, you could, this last one, is that what you're saying? I'm going to assume that it is. And in this mode, you could still do, this is still kind of the way this is described here is it would expect to return a list of events based on how this URL is structured. So it wouldn't be a blending of user data, it would just be the events by themselves. And I think that fits with the kind of REST style philosophy there. So this would still be an event API, or maybe you might call this one something different, like a user event API view, which is also a list API view. And here is where are you going to get that ID from? So in DRF, you could get that ID passed to you. Oh, you like the second method. Okay, well, maybe I don't need to go any further there. There would be a way to do this as well, pulling out the ID from like the keyword arguments, but I think if you can get away, this is like to me, this is like the cleanest approach here. Use the query set, pull the user object out of the request, assuming, again, put the authenticated mix in on here to make sure that it's an authenticated view. But yeah, I think you can extrapolate. Cool. I hope that helps. That's how I would be thinking about this. All right. Back to students. You're welcome. So we got this filter none. I'm wondering what this query is going to be. So this is going to return a query set, right? So this is the breaks. And this is a relation on here, a relation manager. And so the filter should return a query set. And we should be able to actually check this query set. I wonder if I can just print it. Student breaks for everyone dot query. I think that's the way to do this. And then rerun this test. Well, it's going to pass, so we're not going to see anything. No, there it is. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, because I changed how this works, so it's returning none all the time now. And here we go. Here's the actual query that it's doing for the none thing there. Is this what we want? It's doing a select. It's doing from SchoolBreak. Yep. And okay, here is we can see that this is the name of the reference table. So they're just jamming them together. Schools, school breaks, students. Or school breaks, school break, students. As must be the table name that they're going to create, that Django is going to create for us. And it's looking for where the school year is this, and there is a null. Huh. Is that really what we want? Probably. Because as I think about this table, that's going to return no results. Because I'm never going to populate this table where one half of it is blank. That's just not going to be there. So I think this is right. That's cool. Now, the second part of this is can we do this in a single query? That's what I'm less certain of. So could we say, so we're like halfway there. The other thing we could do is perhaps, rather than we have this query, but if we want this second time, the second half where the student break for that student is also true, could we do this in a single query? What would that look like? That would look like we would need the queue object. So let's go do that. And is that in Django models or is that in DB? Queue. I hate searching for this thing. Never remember where the documentation is, and it's a single letter. This is why you don't, as convenient as it might be, folks, don't name your variables with single letters. I think it's in the query set reference. Oh my word. There it is. Good grief. So the queue this kind of queue object idea is a way to do more advanced stuff with your filters. And specifically, normally when you do a filter, a Django filter is going to AND all the conditions together, right? So like you might be filtering on a school year and a student, so that like kind of narrows it down in what we have seen so far. But this is really, we're getting to a condition where, let me pause and make sure I know where this is coming from. I came over there here to try to find, dang it. What is the link? Oh, I'll get back to what I was saying. The condition we're trying to do is querying on the same specific attribute, but in two different kind of modes. So we not only want the ones where it is it was null, like we saw in the query that was printed out, but we also want the ones where it applies to the student. And as I'm saying that out loud, I'm realizing that's not right. Shoot. Okay. Well, I don't think it is. Let's look at the data and see. And the queue object is coming from models. It's coming from the same place as F. So we want from Django DB models import queue. We'll use that in a minute. Go back to get break and come back down here. Okay. So this might not be sufficient for what we want, because this is, I think this is actually, I don't think this is right. Darn it. Okay. look at this test. We've got this SchoolBreak. It's not going to have any many-to-many field on it. Oop. It needs to be, we're looking at this one, I guess. So this is one that will have no many-to-many relation. Okay. If we run this test, are there, because this is still it's still looking at this, it's doing this outer join and looking for when stuff is null. So it's going to join the results that come back from here with the SchoolBreak table. But I don't think that that's going to be right, because that will exclude this, because there's not going to be any result there. There's no join that will merge those things together. So I would expect this to be part of the calculation for the expected SchoolBreak, but I don't think it will be. So let's confirm that. What is the length or count? What is the count on this thing? So my expectation, or my desire, I should say, would be that this is 1, but I think it's going to be 0. Really? Okay, maybe I'm not understanding. I have confession to make. My brain, I'd never fully internalized all of these SQL rules with joins. So left outer join maybe is saying the union of some stuff. Like, I'm not really sure. I'm surprised by this result that we have a 1 there. So maybe I should take it at its word that that's the right thing. Okay. So getting back to the queue object then, what else were we trying to do? So the queue condition that we want to be able to do is we want to say when there are no students. Yeah, I wish I could draw. I don't have a good drawing tool. Maybe what could we use? Yeah, like nothing comes to mind of, do I even have any drawing apps on my Mac? So I'll do that. How about this? I'll do that for a future stream, Shivan. I'll try and see if I can find a proper thing here for drawing this kind of stuff that would definitely benefit from being more visual. So we have this queue object where the queues, where there are no rows that match in the reference table, but we also want the stuff that when the student does match the student that we have, like that. And by using this queue object, we allow now for an OR operation, whereas a typical filter is going to AND the things together. But the queue gives you more flexibility on what kind of operations you can use, because you can use the pipe for the or you can use the ampersand if you still want to explicitly do an ANDing. But the logic that you can generate is more complex. So I think this is what we really want. Now I'm interested, if I rerun this test, what does that query look like now? Ooh. Student. Oh, because I named it wrong. So students in. So we're talking many-to-many now. Does this work? These many-field relations get harder too. Okay, cool. So I think this is the kind of the condition that we want. So this is the isNull part we had before, and where the student half of this, the student ID part, is in this list of 1. Now I'm curious, if I got rid of the in part and just left it at student, what is that going to do? Is that going to issue an equivalent query? Sometimes this is where, hey, nice. I think this is actually better, because we only want to check for one particular query. We don't care about a group. This is where the query thing is really handy. So like if you didn't know about this, so anytime you have a query set, you can, when you're in debug mode, this is important. It doesn't work by default when debug is off. But you can call .query, you can print it, and it will actually print out the query for the database engine that you're using. So technically, I'm not testing against the right thing because this is SQLite and not Postgres locally, but I'm guessing it'll be the same kind of behavior. I can't imagine they would make those different here. So if you're ever in doubt of like, what is the ORM doing? Because there may be times, especially if your app gets more complicated, that the query becomes complex and something is wrong, and you could go do the research on like, well, is this join right, or is there a better way I could do this? Because you'd be surprised. I've seen some code done at work where some really solid engineers did some analysis on some SQL queries and found that like just by switching some of the operators in the ORM, it shuffled around how the ORM built out a whole query and massively improved performance. It's pretty crazy. So ORMs, for all of their benefits, I think that they're a great tool. They can lead you astray if you're not careful with them. Okay, so I think I have this query now that is the breaks for this particular student. I think that it kind of answers this line right here, which is amazing. And what I kind of want to do is take this set of breaks. So it's not even breaks for everyone, because we're not really, that's a bad name now. It's the student's breaks. That's accurate. Actually, we don't need these print statements anymore. So we've got these student breaks. That is our query set, and the logic for the rest of this of calculating. So we need the same kind of lookup scheme, or I desire the same kind of lookup scheme as current as what's here, and you can see how this was done in the cache property, where we loop over all of the breaks, and then do this date calculating logic for reasons I don't need to get into. It has to do with school breaks can happen over ranges, and it builds out the dictionary. It plugs them into this dictionary and then caches that whole thing. So what we want to do is essentially, well, in fact, let's just take all this code for a minute, and we'll say we're going to fix this up. It's still wrong, but we can now replace this self breaks with student breaks, and if it iterates over that, then and this has the wrong return type, so this is where this is wrong. But we could do something like this. This is the inefficient approach right now, but I think this is the correct approach. We just need to make it work with the caching in the future. So I think this is the right query. I think this is the right core logic for building up the dictionary of things that we want to cache. And so where this breaks down right now is that every time you call is get break, which happens often in the app because it loops over stuff and checks regularly, it will call this method over and over again and recalculate all this stuff. So it's not efficient, but hopefully you'll agree with me that it probably is correct at least. So if we check it here, that passes now because it's able to find that break. If we check it here, I expect this would also pass. And for fun, I think this should also pass. Hey, look at that. Sweet. Okay. So we're not done because this is, like I said, it's so inefficient it would be really bad for the app, but we're way closer than we were just a little while ago. So let's delete this comment line. We now have this accurate. What we need to do is then kind of push this thing into a method and do our caching. And this is where, oh man, where do we put this cache? So I liked cache property because it makes it so easy to cache stuff. But when we have other caching we want to do that doesn't fall in line with cache property. I think that, and we have to do it manually. So we're going to reach in for some other tools. So I'm going to actually look. I think I have other examples that with things that are having a knit in here. Yes, this caching will be happening on the server. And to be really clear, it's like not great caching. It's only per request. So it's not like that this will be persisted somewhere for a long time. It's during the life cycle of that particular request, because what I found is like with some of these loops and some of the schedule generation stuff, it has to ask the question of like, is this day a school break? Is it a break? Is it a break? Is it a break? And does it so often that there was lots of query hits on that. So by adding a little cache here, it saved just a ton of that stuff just for that school year instance. Because remember, or you might be joining a little later, TCK3, this is on the school year model. So what happens during the request lifecycle is that we fetch the school year, we ask the break, the API is on the school year, is like, is today a break for this school year? And it, on that first call to this, it goes into get break, and then it goes and looks and populates this cache. But then that is break question, which is asked so often, is all the queries have happened just one time. It's making repetitive queries in the unoptimized version. So it's still doing and I guess a little bit of computation there, because there's this while loop stuff. So there's a tiny bit of computation there, but the real big hurdle is going to the database over and over again. Okay. So I was coming down here to look at, I'm trying to think of like, where have I done some caching stuff on this? Or really I'm interested in, yeah, here we go. I want to make sure I get this right, because I don't like generally overwriting the init of a model, and because I never remember the signature. But you can see that I had to do something similar, some similar caching for enrollments on a student, or some other computationally heavy stuff, or sorry, again, database query expensive stuff. And this is the signature that we want. So we'll pull this out. We'll come up to the top of the school year, and I'm going to put it after the fields. And so we're doing about a general and API as we can, star args and star keyword args. And then we can say, let's create a new instance attribute that is going to be breaks. I guess we'll do the full thing. School breaks by student. Oops. And like so. Okay, so now we have that available to us. Now we can have the right hook to go decide whether to do this caching or not. So we come down to this get break area, and we can see that, well, this is interesting. We need to think about, so we have to think about, what about the case where student is none? What are we going to do there? We can handle that too. It could probably even go in the cache, but we should make sure that that is handled appropriately. Yeah. Okay. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So we have, so the first thing we need to do now that we have this cache is we need to check, is the student in the cache? And so we'll do that as the first check of if, or really what we want to do is when the student is not in the cache. Is not in school breaks by student. That's the state that we care about. And here we can, whoops, I'll get rid of that. Let's move this to there. And we're going to essentially populate breaks by date. And then what we really want to do is set within school breaks by student. We want to set the student and set breaks by date. So we'll have built out this data structure for that warms up the cache. what do I do? Oh, there we go. I had an extra is. Oops. So if the student is not in the dictionary, and remember, if you just do a dictionary, it's doing a key check by default. So if a student is not a key in the dictionary, do all this break computation. And then what we do at the end to make sure that we don't hit that line again is stuff that into the cache. Where this is still wrong is like, this is not guaranteed. Breaks by date is not guaranteed to be here. So if the student, if we came through a second time, we would get a name error here where the variable, local variable, won't exist in the right scope at the right time. So what we have to replace this with is 2 layers. Now we can be confident that school breaks by student will have a dictionary here. I'm pretty certain of that, but you can see MyPy is trying to save us here as well. So we could write this a little differently so that MyPy won't complain. We can write it as like a pure dictionary access, and knowing that we have a dictionary in here, it's saying, okay, cool, gotcha. There's an assumption here that that we're always going to handle all the cases, and I think we will. So maybe this is okay. And the other way to do this, if we wanted to super safeguard about this, would be to have the version that is using the .get like this, and that gets MyPy being angry again. But if you give it a default value of an empty dictionary, so if you're doing a get on an empty dictionary, it's another way of getting to the same none, and just kind of hedging your bets that your cache is going to be populated. Because of the way that we're structuring this, I'm pretty confident that this cache will populate with the right things. Also, like when we get to the none case, I think that we can populate the none case with as a key. So let's check on that, just be certain. But I'm pretty sure a dictionary has no problem using none as a key. So so none in D. Yeah, it looks a little funny, but it works. So, none can be a key, which is good. So I think when we get to this case, we might have to switch the logic a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe this will apply just as well. Like if it'll essentially be, what will this be at that point? Let's think through this. So if student is none, then, and that's the first time through, so it's not in the cache, not a key, then students is none or students is none. I wonder what the query would be for that. It's a curious one. We've got the test that we can check that out, but maybe we should. We'll do that in a little bit once we get to that to do. So I'm going to undo this change and bring it back to the square brackets approach, and I think that does the work. Now, should I refactor this? Like, is it worth taking this little chunk of logic and pulling it out into a little helper method? Is none an empty array? No. So what you might have missed is the way I'm going to model this is when there are no students, or when the method is not providing a student. What essentially I'm looking for is the school breaks that apply to all students. So it's like saying, I don't have enough information for you to filter to a specific student, so give me the breaks that apply to all of the students, which will be everything in the school break table for that school year. I think if I didn't answer your question or didn't quite get what you're saying, let me know. I'll try and fix that. So let's run this test file. See if, hey, all the tests pass. So those 3 tests that we wrote are all passing for get break. Then maybe we should also check there was a test up here for when the student is none and is getting the break. What is none in that context? So this is the case where the student is none. So there's no student passed in. The example that I showed, is it still up? Yeah, so the calendar. The calendar doesn't care at all about differentiating between whether you have a student taking a break that day or not. Like somebody who is a parent here is going to want to see, like, I have breaks all that day, or like maybe it's just my son that has a break that day, maybe it's my daughter, but it doesn't matter. Somebody has a break that day. And so I just want to, and when this is calculated, there are no students that are considered in this calculation of this display of this calculator. Or sorry, I keep calling it calculator, calendar. And so this is the condition, or this is one of the conditions. I think there might be a couple others where I want to check if there's a break that day or not, but I don't care whose break it is. So that's what none means in that context. And if you're talking about where students equal none in this queue, if that's what you meant, then that is referring to what this is the syntax for saying, I've modeled this as a ManyToManyField, the SchoolBreak. When the SchoolBreak has no associated matches in the many-to-many table that maps between the SchoolBreak and the student. Sorry, it's confusing. There's too many tables involved, but the student table, SchoolBreak table, and the many table in between, and when there's something over here but not in the middle table. That's what that is. Because I have to have both of those conditions to represent the full set of what SchoolBreaks are by the definition that I picked, which we decided about over here. Talk through, like, there are 2 ways to view this many-to-many, and I'm picking this path where when there is no many-to-many relation in the middle, SchoolBreaks will apply to all students. So that's maybe some missing context there. Okie dokie. I think this is a bunch of logic that is confusing to this method, perhaps, so I might filter this out into effectively like this cache property here. I'm pretty sure that this thing is not used anywhere anymore, so we can delete this. We can also, do I want to delete or just reuse the signature? Sure. Let's delete cache property, which is going to get rid of it here because that's the only place that was using it. So now we have this unused method, but we're going to reclaim it. We're going to take the logic from here. We'll drop it here for the moment. And it's missing student, which I expect. Put in student. We'll say that this is an optional student. Then we'll change this to get breaks. Well, let's make it private. Get breaks for student. So there's our function. We can delete the old version of this. We're going to leave the return. Then we can come up to here and we can say, really, this is get breaks by date now becomes that private method. Get breaks for student, pass in the student. And then delete this stuff. Okay. Let's check if that file is still all passing, if I did that refactoring right. Looks like I did. That's good. And final bit, this is probably, definitely like, this is all I got tonight. Let's check on this one last test that see what this query is. I'm now quite curious of what this is going to be. And then we'll call it a night. So now we've got this. What happens when this is the queue resolves the same thing? Is Django going to figure out this is the same queue object and be okay with that? I'm hoping so. So this is more of just satisfying my own intellectual curiosity at this point. And we're going to need to make this test fail in order to see the output. Okay. Yep. All right. Well, it's redundant because it has SchoolBreak students, student ID is null, or student ID is null, but who cares? I don't think it's going to materially affect the query performance, would be my guess. If anything, I suspect Postgres will be like, what are you doing? This is the same thing, and throw out the extra condition. I don't know that for certain. I'm not sure if Postgres is that smart. Seems reasonable, but I'm pretty confident that it's going to be fine. And again, it's going to then, so in that case, what will it do? It's going to insert, so student would be none here, so it will treat none as that key, and then have that list of breaks that will be all the breaks that don't show up in the many-to-many reference, which is what I said is the stuff that applies to all of the students. Ooh, maybe that's wrong. This is where I need, to Shivan's point earlier, I need a Venn diagram tool. Because that isn't all the breaks that apply. That is actually the intersection or the minimal set, because it's the ones that will, oh man, am I getting myself wrapped up? Here, let me think on this. Make sure this is right. That query is, again, this comes back to my knowledge of, do I understand the joins well enough? Shoot. What is that query again? It could just be me getting late and not thinking this through super well anymore. I'm concerned that, like, what if I only by doing this and in this way with the equal none, I'm filtering out the dates that are only specific to a particular student, when really what I want on the calendar is the union of all of that stuff. So it would be the and of everything, not only the ones that show up just in the SchoolBreak table, but the ones that also show up in the many-to-many table. So I think it might actually be different. Yeah, that seems, the more I think on it, I think that's right. Rats. Okay. Is there a way we could demonstrate this? Probably. We would want to put in this has break method. Here's how we can prove this, I guess. If I add a student and put in an extra break so that there are like 2 breaks in the test, and I test I want to set them at different dates probably so that they don't clash with each other. But I think with the way this query is set up for none, that it's going to not get the length of this, the count of this would be 1 and not 2, when it should be 2. All right, let's try that. Let's check it out. So let's add in come back here and go up to this test. We're going to rework this a little bit because it needs to be a second school break. Second break is equal to the school break factory. Now we need to make sure that we connect up the school year on this, so we have to get the school year attribute from earlier defined thing. So there are breaks for the same year, and then we're going to add in the second break. I'm going to add that option there. Okay, so now this test should still pass for this one, I think. But I think where it's going to fail is what is the length of this? And if this says 2, then I'm like, I clearly don't know what I'm doing with outer joins. Okay. Oh, good. I am sane. I do understand this. All right. So it's both good and bad. It means that it's good that I actually understand how this join is working. It's bad that the code is not right. All right. Well, that's a bummer. So what can we do differently? When maybe we just have to change the breaks. Yeah. Okay. We can do this. So if student is none, this is when we want all of the breaks. And get breaks for student becomes kind of a lie because sometimes it's not actually a student. Yeah. So let's say that we want to say when student is none, get all the breaks. Now, that should be evident from the code, but remember, like, I'm not always at this spot in the code, and like syntax or editors can show doc strings. So sometimes that is helpful, and it will also explain to me why is this optional when the method is called for student. That should clear that up. So we want let's do the refactoring in 2 steps. So we want to have when it's none, we want to do all of them. When it is not none, we want to have the queue object like that. And so we want to have this be all. And now, if I run this should return a 2. Okay, cool. It does. Need another test for that, probably. I have a feeling my coverage is going to fail at some point. Maybe not. I don't know. Test this. And this is for 434. So we can get rid of those prints. We can change. I want to change the student breaks to just be breaks because student breaks is, I don't know, longer than I want. Whoops. I spelled that wrong. Okay, so now we've got breaks. And we're looping over the breaks. Okay. Neat. We've got this, we have now properly handled none. I'm glad I thought more about that. That would have been a bummer to catch that bug later. Whoops, apparently I'm repeating myself. This is actually not even the same statement. The breaks that apply to all students and get all the breaks are actually different things. So the breaks that apply to all students is that intersection, like that smaller set. So this is not right. This is a more accurate statement. And I'm probably like repeating myself. And then since this is the public method, maybe we don't need to say it down here. Maybe I'll regret that later, but I think I'm okay with that. Like the public method has the thing that I care about, and that's the thing I should be calling. Okay, is there any final change that I need to make here? Okay, we can get rid of this to-do. We created ourselves a new to-do with a test. And I think that feels pretty good. Let's see how we're doing. Oh, man. Boo. Oh. I still have the second break in there. Whoops. Okay, because those two breaks had overlapping dates. And I think I actually have checks elsewhere in the code in some like the forums that you can't do that. So that's not going to be a real constraint in the system. It was in the test data, but that's something else. So now this should be passing. Okay. Now let's run. I suspect that we're missing a bunch of coverage. Let's run a quick coverage run to like finish this off. I think this is like my longest stream by a long shot. I think I'm just trying to power through this feature. I'm starting to get tired of it, and you all might be too. Tired of thinking about my domain model and school breaks and students and stuff. I wouldn't blame you. So this will run, and we should just have a few to-dos left. So the rest of the to-dos are really about coming back to the core view. Oh man, failures. Oh shoot. Okay, not sure what's going on there. We'll get to that. Coming back to the core views wow, that is a bloodbath. That were causing, that we couldn't prove until we had the data. And we'll fix that up. And it looks like we have other problems. Oh. Okay, thank goodness. We just haven't run the migration yet. So remember I showed earlier that my setup was that you have to have all of the migrations for my coverage mode of this. And here it's proving to me like you're missing a table. So we're missing the migration. And I'm pretty confident at this point that I like where we put the many-to-many thing on the SchoolBreak itself. Karimzi, yeah, go ahead, fire away with your Python questions. I'm running out of steam mentally, so I don't know how sharp I'll be, but I'll try and answer. So let's do that last bit of migration stuff and try and run this again. And I don't know how much of this is real failures and how much of this is new stuff, because took a pretty big hit on this coverage stuff, and I don't know that. I think that's not right. Something seems off, and I don't want to trust that until we've fixed the migration part. I just realized that I named the branch wrong too. Students, fun. Let's make a migration. That adds the students, and then we can we'll run the suite again. Now that we have the migration available, those tests that failed previously shouldn't, so it shouldn't be so horrible. We're still going to have missing coverage, I suspect, but it shouldn't be nearly as bad. And you can see, just look at the test failures up here. They all seem to be, well, they look like operational errors from what it appears to be here. And it takes a little bit to get going, but once it gets going, it's still some failures. So I don't know what's going on with those. Didn't expect failures, but oh, it's related to query counts. Okay. Yeah, we're doing another query now, which I expected. So that I'm sure what's failing on that test is, and I'll get you there in a second, Crimsy. This test probably has more than one student. I would need to go look at it, but because it would have more than one student, it is going to ask about. It's going to look at the school breaks twice, I suspect, and that would show up in here somewhere. So I bet we could even find it if we scanned hard enough. But so I'll fix those. Those will be easy query modifications to those tests. And it looks like it's just a +1, which is what I expect. So I expect there to be with this change, there has to be a query per student. There's ways that I could optimize that and do all of this, like the stuff we just did with all that caching. We could probably just query all the breaks at once and then just run through them and make that mapping table right there. And as I'm saying this out loud, that actually sounds pretty appealing, but I won't do that tonight. And if it really bothers me, I can optimize that in the future. Okay, you want to make a simple function that asks a user, what is your name? Okay. So the way to do this, the way I would think to do it, there are probably many ways. And I'm not going to cover like do you want to have a different response? Oh, you do. Okay, so you have what is your name, and then you want to have please what is your name. Yep, I think you're pretty close to what I would probably do. So you could say we might even this is a short enough one that we could probably even do this in the REPL. So if I ask if we do an input call, right? That's where we do a prompt. What is your name? And put a little space, and it's going to prompt what is your name, and I could say Matt, and it returns the string Matt. So we would take that same thing and we put it in a name. Because the user enters first time. If they enter it first time, the function breaks. Okay, yeah, we'll get there. So if I add a value here, now we've got name is a string of Matt, right? So if we go up to the same question though, and we say, and I give no answer, then name is an empty string. Okay, empty strings in Python are falsy. So they will, if you could say bool on an empty string, it's going to return false. That's what I mean by falsy. So you could, if you have the two questions, you could essentially say, you could have the what is your name, and have this prompt here. And this is where it's not going to work on the REPL because it's not going to be interactive enough. Let's throw this up in a little script. So Vim name asker. So we've got your name. is the starting point. We have input. What is your name? Okay, there's your first thing that you were asking about. Now, since we know that so that'll block, right? That's good. That's what we want. And you eventually want to say, you know, your name is name. That's the F string syntax to do a replacement. Okay. So if I run this, see if this will work. Name asker. What is your name? I'd say Matt, and it says your name is Matt, and it's done. All right. So your case that you care about is what if you don't get a value? So, and you're saying you want to continue to ask until you get a value. So I think maybe, and you might have been able to do it with a break, but I don't think that's necessary. But since I've created a local variable here, you could say, while I don't have a name. So while, and every time through the input loop, we're going to reassign to this. You'll ask your question again. You can say, please. So you can say, now you can do your other one of, please, what is your name? And be pleading or whatever. So I think this will address the problem that you have. So you get the first time, and if they have answered you, then you're going to skip the while loop entirely, and you're going to come down to your print and be done. If they have not answered you, you're going to ask them again in the more pleading way. And if they continue to not answer, well, then it's going to go back up to the top. Name is still going to be an empty string, and so it's going to go back into your while loop. So I think this is right. Let's test out that theory. What is your name? I'm not telling you. Please, what is your name? I'm still not telling you. And you can see I can go, and then I finally type in an answer, and it's going to cause us to bail out. Your name is Matt. Yep, that's it. It's 4 lines of Python. Hopefully that, I hope I aside from essentially giving you the solution here, hopefully added more context of why that is the way it is. Yeah, I think Python is a really fun language to learn. Yeah, you threw me a softball. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate and can understand wrestling with it and the difficulty of it. Like if you're new to programming or unfamiliar with Python, I can understand that breaking into any language can be challenging. I generally stream Wednesdays, every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time, which is I'm East Coast in the United States. So I don't stream on days where I'm also the local organizer for my Python, the Python meetup in my town. So that happens to be on the same night. And so I'm not always, I'm not 100% consistent, but they usually catch me like 3 or 4 times a month is about how often I get to stream. All right, I have run way longer though than I anticipated that I would. So I'm gonna have to call it a night here because I've been going for nearly 3 hours. Hopefully y'all enjoyed what we covered today. Yeah, you're okay with Java. Okay. There's some really good resources out there. I actually learned on books because I've been doing Python since 2007, 2006, somewhere in there. So I'm an old guy at this point. So I learn differently than most people get recommended now. I do know that there are some good resources on free code camp. So if you want to learn some Python and you like that stuff, I don't know of any good video courses offhand because I can't speak to the ones I haven't taken. So I'm sure, but I'm Python being as popular as it is, has tons of stuff out there that can help you learn. So good luck on your journey, and yeah, I wish you luck. We're going to return to some more of this break stuff next week, finish off some of these details, finish off some of the tests, make sure that all the coverage is good. and get satisfied with this solution and then move on to the next thing. Thanks, I appreciate that, and I'm glad I was able to help you out. So I do take all this content as well and post it up onto YouTube. So you can find me on YouTube at Matt Lehman, and I've got old streams there on this project and sometimes some other projects. There's also Python videos from my local meetup, so recordings if you are interested in some of that stuff. You can go check that out. And if you could, give me a follow here or a like or subscribe or whatever on YouTube, that would help me out and help me get found by others and share this content. So I'd really appreciate that. Hope you all have a great day, evening, wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in, and I will see you next time. Take care.